who was finally brutal enough to please both company and the CIA, massacre their striking workers, a man who would go so far as to call himself the Hitler of Guatemala, forced to exist within a system where their labor was never enough to pay off the debts that their employers constantly kept them under. It was slavery.
Organophosphates, organochlorines, chemicals that disrupt hormone systems, cause cancer. But it's the workers on pineapple plantations that are directly exposed to these toxic pesticides. Adi lives next to the plantations that supply Del Monte. Her water's been polluted by agrochemicals, including bromacil, a herbicide linked to cancer.
No tenía ningún tipo de enfermedades. Y ahora no. Ahora mi salud.
Hey guys, it's Lavender here, and today I'm back with another political activism video. Today I want to do the capitalism atrocities, the pure evil, the avocado, banana, and pineapple files. I deep dive into this topic, so let's get started into this topic. So yeah. In recent years, there's been a pronounced boom in demand for avocados in places such as the USA and Western Europe. The health properties of the superfood as well as its aesthetic qualities make it a primary fodder as Instagram content and as the inspiration behind a broad range of products. Bananas are widely cultivated today. The industry first established in Central America in the early 20th century was historically dominated by a few U.S. firms. The first generation of firms were notorious for establishing the banana republics, enlisting corruption and coups in US imperialism and things like that to cement their dominance and ensure generous land and tax concessions. Today, just 5 companies operate 80% of the international banana trade, and production has spread all over the world. In 1911, the founder of Clayman Fruit Company, Zam Zurkuri, organized a coup against the Honduran government, installing a U.S. puppet-backed Manuel Bolenta as president. Besides the land and tax breaks awarded to them, the instability generated by the coup, combined with Honduras's unpayable national debt, allowed Camel to undermine the government, establish a monopoly on goods and employment, and build up the country's infrastructure to suit their own needs. The first-generation firms are all still around today under different names. The United Fruit Company, having acquired Camel, became Chikwa, while Standard Fruit Company now operates under the name of Dole. UFC's involvement in the 1928 Banana Massacre, when almost 32,000 of the plantation slaves went on strike, asking, among other things, to be paid in cash rather than with company-owned coupons only for use at the company-owned stores. 3,000 of these workers are estimated to have been killed and murdered in this massacre by Colombian military forces acted upon the direction of UFC or UFC-affiliated individuals. More recently, Chikwa Brands International, the mid-century brand of the UFC, would admit to paying nearly $2 million to right-wing death squads targeting labor union leaders in Colombia. How Hawaii lost its queen. The Queen of Hawaii, Leela Fali, to the fruit tycoons at Dole. Stanford Dole led the coup with the help of the American government. His cousin, once removed, James Dole, started the Hawaiian Pineapple Company, which is now the Dole Food Company on the islands. American militia come to the island, threatening battle, and the Queen surrendered and stepped down. After the coup succeeded, Stanford Dole was named President of the Republic of Hawaii. The depiction of Dole as a 20th century American success story obscures a deeper meaning and history of violence and imperialism. The past violence continues to be ratified and perpetuated through the present-day tourist industry. Pineapple is practically synonymous with the Hawaiian Islands, and Hawaiian Islands, all over, the Caribbean as a whole. And no company looms larger at the image than Dole. Today, tourists can easily take a bus from downtown Honolulu to Wataha to see the Dole plantation experience. Some of the past history is workers were recruited from China, Japan, and the Philippines and Portugal. As a result, the plantation system developed in which companies built frequently segregated schools, stores, and housing for their own workers, which were designed to keep them in a cycle of debt. Despite the image of Hawaii as a laborless and carefree paradise, the operation of pineapple industry required demanding physical labor, frequently performed by women, and as the pineapple industry has historically been one of the largest employers of women on the islands, much of the labor was part-time or seasonal, adventurous for students, but unstable for those who need to provide for their families all year round. These workers often lived in company housing modeled after sugar plantation communities where they were subject sometimes to heavy-handed paternalistic supervision under the plantation managers. As well as Dole's success came from capitalizing on Hawaiian bodies and a Hawaiian aesthetic to appeal to white American consumers who were led to believe that Hawaii was a far-off exotic place. Despite the economic significance of tourism in Hawaii, the industry has led to environmental destruction in those areas and continues to displace many indigenous native Hawaiians as they are forced from neighborhoods as real estate prices climb, due to the tourist industry. At statehood, Hawaiians outnumber tourists 2-1. Today, now tourists outnumber native Hawaiians 30-1. One aspect of the popular culture around the banana has been its over-sexualization connected with blackness. One of its most famous representations was Josephine Baker in her banana skirt in 1926. In a Paris, her banana skirt turned into strategically placed menacing spikes that invoked mental associations with male genitalia and male organs. In her banana skirt, Baker became Fatu, who in the show went down a tree like a monkey, with the monkey's favorite treat being bananas around her hips, to the rhythm of barely dressed savage men's drums, and entered into the life of a white explorer who had been sleeping underneath the tree. Following Baker's show, dolls came out dressed in banana skirts, became sold across Europe by the thousands. Stickers publicizing Baker's movie Zo were distributed among fruit vendors in Paris to be placed on the banana when they were selling. The connection between bananas, monkeys, and blacks firmly cemented entered Western imagery, savage sexuality, blackness, and animality. By the 1920s and 1930s, many music song lyrics came out that alluded to the banana as a symbol, and by the 1940s, the sexual images of the banana had become increasingly associated with racist images of the fruit as the creation of the Miss Chihuahua character for the United Fruit Company's advertisements. Chihuahua logo is another way in which non-white bodies have been objectified and exploited and commodified. Not only has the rebrand using Miss Chihuahua banana been sexist, the mascot's earliest feature in the UFC commercial reveals the sexist content in which it was made. In the Technicolor commercial, a mocking caricature of a black man attempts to eat a noticeably less cartoonish white man, but is stopped by Miss Chihuahua Banana, who proceeds to use a language like refined and civilized to talk about changing the indigenous African characters' eating habits. This rhetoric has been constantly used by outright racist and transphobic or anti-Semitic groups like the British colonizers during the imperial civilization mission in India. The banana industry is actually facing a crisis, one we have seen before. During the 1950s and 60s, race 1 strains of the fungus FOC wiped out the most gross myco plantations in Central America. FOC is the soil-living fungus responsible for Panama disease. It is resistant to fungicides and kills plants within a few months or years. Plants can be asymptomatic for a long time before they begin to die. As the host plant dies, spores produced by the fungus are released, in which the pathogen survives and spreads. These spores can survive in soil for up to 30 years and infect plants via the roots as they grow in infected soil in that area. The remarkable spread of Panama disease is an issue caused by humans. In an effort to boost capitalism profits, companies seek to maximize production, reduce regulatory difficulties, and cultivate predictability to guarantee the quality of the product. To ensure predictability, new plants and plantations are propagated by cuttings, suckers, or pups are taken from the base of the plant and used to grow genetic clones, meaning all the plants of each plantation are nearly identical. The consequences of these actions and methods means the creation of the genetic monoculture allowing FOC to easily overcome the similar immune systems of the entire crop population. If a cutting is taken from an asystematic plant to begin a new plantation, that new plantation will be infected from day one. The spread is facilitated as plants are packed into unnatural density in plantations to maximize profit output. The first reaction from companies was to move plantations in the area, tearing up acres of rainforest and reckoning capitalism rhetoric. Capitalism not only kills the environment and causes biodiversity loss, but it also kills food biodiversity as a whole. Agriculture chemicals applied by hand are aerially sprayed by a plane. It is estimated that 85% of these pesticide chemicals sprayed by the plane fail to land on the crop, instead saturating the whole area, including workers that are working in the area, their homes, and food. When bananas are packed, workers must apply fungicides and disinfectants such as formaldehyde to protect the fruit during shipment. In many regions, land has been so contaminated that the future agricultural use is impossible in those areas. In communist Cuba, where protection of the environment is ensured in the Constitution, as we see a different story. Cultivated land is operated cooperatively and not by international corporations. The focus is on producing diverse crops using ecological friendly methods to prevent ecosystem destruction as a whole and preserve biodiversity in those areas. This is possible due to the political input being on meetings the needs of the population and the planet rather than the expansion and accumulation of capital. One other clue that the sovereignty of the impact that these chemicals and pesticides as a whole is the silence of the plantations and the farm plantations. There are no birds singing songs or animal calls because there is a lack of biodiversity, and there's a huge biodiversity loss in those areas because there's no longer any wildlife in those areas. In summary, banana growing involves intensive use of pesticides covering banana bunches with polyanethide bags to protect them from wind, attacks on insects or birds, and to maintain optimum temperatures. Pesticides go into water used for drinking, cooking, and washing, contaminating the water supply. For plantation workers and for local people in those areas, the health impacts of extensive agrochemical use are numerous from these banana plantations and other fruit plantations, ranging from depression and respiratory problems to cancer, miscarriages, and stillbirths and birth defects as a whole. Tens of thousands of workers are left sterile, meaning they cannot get pregnant or, any of that stuff by the use of these chemicals. In Nicaragua and Costa Rica in the 1970s, people are still seeking justice in the U.S. courts from the multinationals involved. In a 2002 investigation, Human Rights Watch found that Ecuadorian children as young as 8 working on banana plantations as a whole in really hazardous conditions. Children began working between the ages of 8 and 13. Most again were starting at the age of 8, 10, or 11. Their average workday consisted of 12 hours, and fewer than 40% of the children were still in school by the time they turned 14. In the course of their work, they were exposed to toxic pesticides in the areas and had to use sharp machetes and knives that can hurt them, to haul heavy loads of bananas, to drink unsanitary water in the areas, and some were sexually harassed or sexually assaulted in the banana fields. Roughly 90% of the children told Human Rights Watch that they continued working while toxic fungicides were rained down on them and sprayed from airplanes flying overhead. Shaniqua, Del Monte, Dole, Favorita, and Nobu have all at some time worked with plantations on which children labor. More than 70% of the children interviewed by NGO said they had worked on plantations that almost exclusively supplied dole. Workers on banana plantations in countries such as the Dominican Republic, Belize, and Costa Rica, there are migrants who have little chance of exercising their rights as humans, labor, and other social rights, especially if they have no legal status in those countries. The exploitation of vast tracts of land by banana companies has often driven out indigenous populations, and took their land and stuff like that. In the Caribbean coastal regions, the Capybara and the Bribri peoples are presently facing the threat of contamination of their rivers, pressure on their lands, as well as negative effect on their culture and environment as a whole. When they're young, people begin working on the plantations, cultural genocide. For some time, the avocado has been a darling of the food movement. Nutritious and delicious avocados are loved by vegans, omnivores alike, who consume 11 billion pounds of them worldwide each year. Additional health benefits of this green tasty fruit include antioxidant, anticancer, antidiabetic, anti-therapeutic, anti-hypertension, and anti-inflammatory, and antimicrobial effects, whether they are mashed into toast, put into a smoothie, or added to recipes in dozens of other ways. Avocados are more versatile than they are tasty. As they are tasty, but they have a distinguished history that reaches well beyond the hipster menus and health food stores. Unfortunately, avocados might not be as green as they seem. At least from an environmental standpoint, avocados are an especially thirsty crop. Michoacan accounts for 80% of Mexico's avocado production, which itself is the largest avocado producer and exporter in the world, with an average annual production of 1.56 million tons over the last decade. Forested areas were similarly cleared, either by falling or burning, to make way for avocado cultivation, aka deforestation, in those areas. Even though this was illegal given the need for authorization for changes in land use, estimates vary, but it was thought that around 50% of avocado cultivation in this city is illegal, as the change in land use has never been officially approved in those areas. Aside from deforestation, the expansion of cultivations has caused significant environmental concerns given their impact on biodiversity and biodiversity loss as a whole and the environment's whole well-being. The phytosanitary requirements dictated by the USDA, the U.S. Department of Agriculture, which is necessary for exportation, certification, and essentially dictate the no other crops, plants, or trees can be inside the export certified aside from the avocado trees. This requires regular attention and the liberal use of pesticides to meet such standards, and has an important ramification in terms of a loss of biodiversity in those areas, such in plants, crops, and wildlife, and the avocado zone as a whole. It also demonstrates the power that the USDA has over in the way of which avocado is cultivated. The lack of other plants in those areas within, those areas has also been seen as in having led to increased surface runoff, which has resulted in flash flooding in those areas when there has been heavy rains in those areas. The use of pesticide has affected the health of the people and the surrounding areas in the avocado zone in the form of cancer, respiratory problems, and the use of fertilizer, which provokes clouds of flies, causes gastrointestinal problems for many residents living really close to those plantations. Given that the avocado zone is located at the fringes of a mountainous plateau, the cultivation of avocados has a key influence on the water basin of the surrounding lowlands. Avocados utilize a significant amount of water, as they are a really thirsty crop, and far more than the equivalent area of pine trees, for example. The huge growth in avocado cultivation has thus drained aquifers and led to water shortages, and, in those areas for crop cultivations within the southern Terry Cleany region area. The cultivation of avocados has also exacerbated the drying out and the warming processes of the climate change crisis within the avocado zone, which has seen temperatures rises and has meant the production of avocados in some of the lower parts of the zone has become uneconomical. The warming of the climate and the use of pesticides as a whole has also provoked plagues, which have affected the native pine trees in the areas, causing them to dry out and die in those areas. Another Mexican town protects the forest from avocado growers and drug cartels and has taken action against this capitalism destruction. Regular citizens have taken the fight against illegal logging into their own hands in the pine-covered mountains of western Mexico, where loggers clear entire hillsides for avocado plantations that drain the local water supply and draw drug cartels hungry for extortion money. In some places, like the indigenous township of Sharon in Michoacan State, the fight against illegal logging and planting has been so successful it's as if a line has been drawn across the mountainside. Avocados and cleared land on one side, pine forests on the other. This required a decade-long revolt in which townspeople declared themselves and formed their own government. David Ramos Garcia, a member of Cheyran's Self-Growing Farmers Board, says farmers here have agreed on a total ban on commercial avocado orchards or plantations, which he contends bring violence, bloodshed. People are allowed to have 3, 4, 5, or at most 10 avocado plants to supply food, but commercial planting isn't allowed, he said. The reason is clear. On patrol, Ramos Garroto looks out across an almost deforested valley into a neighboring township. Rows of young avocado trees stand in lines up to the diluted slopes that once held pine trees and other trees. We have realized the only thing avocados do is soak up all the water and our forests produce. Like they dry out like the forests. He had said, the first thing avocado growers do is dig retaining ponds to water their orchard, draining streams of the precious water that had been used by people further down the mountain. Then drug cartels extort money from the avocado farmers and growers. But he says local farm families are already being affected by the avocado plantations. People in these areas have traditionally been able to get water from the local streams for their animals, goats, cows, or sheep. He said they can't even find water anymore, sometimes even for themselves, and now they have to haul it in a pickup truck or in the foot with horses. Turns out, bee labor is required to produce most avocados and other foods in the U.S. Honeybees pollinate most fruits and vegetables in the country, with native bee populations in sharp decline due to the capitalism-caused climate change crisis. There aren't enough of them to complete the job naturally or efficiently, and soon bees could actually be extinct. And that's a huge red flag, because that'll lead to biodiversity loss, and it'll lead to the Mother Earth, being murdered as a whole. Pineapple workers to receive $4.8 million for abuse, horrible living conditions on Maui farm. Former pineapple workers will be receiving $4.8 million in compensation after experiencing discrimination and abuse while working on a Maui farm. The lawsuit was filed in 2011 and said the abuse had happened between 2003 to 2007. According to the EEOC, Thai workers at Maui Pineapple face physical violence, such as being slapped on the hand, thrown against the wall, grabbed, and punched in the face. The workers were also threatened with claims of deportation and arrest if they talked, aka retaliation. The judgment said workers were also forced to live in housing infested with rats, scorpions, and bugs. Some were provided insufficient or malfunctioning toilet facilities, sewers.